He's John Timpane.
And he's Don Rooney.
And this is
The Musical Innertube.
Now, you may ask, why is this podcast called The Musical Innertube?
And we may reply, because that's its name, of course.
Now, how did this podcast get that name?
Back in college, we hosted a radio show. Once, we tried to introduce a soothing musical interlude.
Instead, we messed up and wound up introducing a soothing musical inner tube, and the name stuck.
So here we are, hundreds of years later, still talking
to interesting people about their interesting lives.
Difference makers who really make a difference. They used to call me Snow White, but I drifted. If you lean in, will men just look down your blouse? Too much of a good thing is wonderful. It's not that I'm bitter, or how I learned to stop worrying about visible panty lines and conquered the world. These and other titles have come from the delightful mind of today's guest, Gina Barreca. Brilliant person, memoirist, scholar on women's use of humor, very good topic, opinion writer, and much else. Gina is a distinguished professor of English literature and feminist theory at the University of Connecticut, where she has been teaching since years began with 19. Years ago, I tried to get Gina to be a regular commentary page writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, but I lost out to another wonderful paper, the Hartford Courant. Today, she's with us to discuss a new collection of essays she has edited titled Fast Fallen Women, 75 Essays of Flash Nonfiction. Welcome, welcome, dear Gina.
I am so delighted to be here and having a conversation with you over words.
Yes.
Because most of the time when we got to know each other, it was through emails because we were talking about, I was writing stuff for you, and you were one of the great, I'm sure you still are, but one of the great editors. I remember pitching you an idea for the Philadelphia Inquirer on the attractiveness of the Joker in the Batman movies, and how all the women really that I knew, I think I was in my 40s at that point, were like, yeah, I would really rather go out with the Joker than Batman. And how that was betrayal of the whole. We were all these feminists and fighting for equity and equal access for women. And then we're like, I really like the bad boy. And what a contradiction that was. Absolutely. And you took it right away, and it remains one of my favorite pieces. But a lot of what I wrote for you, because I knew I was writing, and this is one of the interesting parts about writing or creating anything, is that when you respect and like somebody you're writing for, you have an idea. It's like, I want to make this guy happy. It's not just writing for the world. Sort of writing for one person. But it's great, don't you think, that everybody's got that one person that's like, he's going to like this line. And that, especially as a writer, when he likes that line, or you get back that line going like, take this out, this one's too much, and your heart dries and dies a little bit. But
well, there was one line in that essay that I really liked. So thank you so much. No, you made me very, very happy with all of your writing.
And I'm glad that there's somebody like you in John's life, Gina, because I've spent most of my life trying to piss him off.
And we can now take a pause to talk about the difference between men and women. No woman has ever gone up to another woman and, as a way of showing affection, said, yo bucket face. Like, we don't do that for each other. And then, of course, no woman has ever been able to take a compliment. You then get into a fight. When you say to a woman, you look wonderful today, she goes, you kidding? Look at my hair. Look, they left this whole set. When they cut this, they left this section out. I look asymmetrical. And you can't insult a man. If you say, John, you've been wearing that same sweatshirt since 1972. John will go, still fits, right?
Yeah, it's comfortable.
Exactly.
Yep. Well, we don't understand that we're being insulted when we are. We don't get it. It's just, I think, talk about being on different wavelengths. But see, you're so good at this. We've already started. Gina, this book follows two others titled Fast Funny Women of 2021, which I have on my shelves, and Fast Fierce Women of 2022, which I stole. I'd love to know, if anything, what holds this series together, and can you tell us what flash nonfiction is and why it seems to work so well here?
The Fast what I now am referring to as the Fast Women series didn't actually start out as a series. It started with Flash Funny Women because the idea of women's humor has been what I've been studying since I was in graduate school back during the Jurassic period. And when I went to my dissertation advisor and said, I'd like to deal with women's humor in British literature. And they said, well, if there was humor in British literature, and I quote, I don't write fiction because I can't make anything up, but I have a good memory. And that's what you need for humor. And he said, a very nice man, Gerhard Joseph said, well, if there was something called women's humor or women's comedy in literature, don't you think someone else would have written about it? It's like, well, nah. And so that's what I've done for all of these years, and happily now other people are sort of joining me, men and women, talking about gender difference in humor. But so it was a former student of mine who started this press, which is an independent press called Woodhall. And I have now discovered after teaching for 36 years at the University of Connecticut that the best way to deal with people in the publishing industry is to grow them from stem cells. The publisher is a former creative writing student, Dave Lashare, who's fabulous. My publicist, Laura Rossi, who's brilliant and now a big deal as a publicist in New York. She's very good at what she does. She started at UConn the year I started at UConn. So, I mean, I have many of the writers in the books are people who were my former students who've gone on to write enormously successful novels that have been published in 27 different languages. They are one woman, Dawn Lundy Martin, who is in the first series, is now the Troy Dolcott Chair at the University of Pittsburgh. And so she has a chair, and she's the head of Africana studies and is a poet, part of the American Academy of Poetry. Like, I just get them when they're little and try to hold on to them and try never to let them go. And so it's been one of the fun parts. So David Legere, when he started the press, said, would you consider doing this flash fiction collection of funny women, knowing that I've known a lot of funny women writers? And I said, absolutely, this would be great. And the book did so well. And Mimi Pond, who's a New York Times bestselling graphic novelist who did the book about her time as a server in Haight-Ashbury's in the 60s, she did a book called Over Easy that's brilliant. And she did the cover. And, you know, all of these brilliant writers wrote for the book. I just asked them. And it's amazing what people will do when they were like in a mall where they have the anchor stores. So the big fancy writers were the anchor writers. And then, so there are 15 of those, and the rest are emerging writers or women of any age. I mean, they're from 20 to 89 who may never have seen their work in print before, or if they have, it's never been in a book with an ISBN number. And so the senior writers, the people who've been around the block, are very happy to be included next to people who are really starting out. And so it's a genuine mix of women writing from different perspectives. And Funny started out with sort of everybody like I knew. And then Fierce, because the first book did well, then Fierce came out as like stories about strength. Some of them were funny. Some of them were really just about the days when you get up in the morning and you need to congratulate yourself on the fact that you took a shower and, you ate healthily and you went to bed sober. And then in Fast Fallen Women, I really just said, okay, now let's rip. Now let's do what counts as a fall in women. And I think we've discovered that the three of us grew up Roman Catholic, right? Mm-hmm. There are a lot of different versions of fallen women. And again, at 66, I am a recovering Catholic. I cannot be anything else, but I can't actually participate. And that was because for women my age, the church had one lesson, and that was to remember that sex was something dirty and disgusting that you save for someone you love.
Yeah.
And so, after, 30 years of therapy and the right medication, it's easier. But writing for this book, it's not about sex. Sex is too easy. There are many ways to fall. Women fall. They feel they're evil if they ate a muffin. They feel they're evil if they had children, if they didn't have children, if they took care of their mother in their home until she died, but they didn't do it well enough, if they didn't take care of their mother, if they went to work and succeeded, but they succeeded too much so that other women were jealous, if they went to work and didn't succeed so that they failed. The ways that women identify themselves as fallen. And this again includes essays by Amy Tan.
Yes.
Right? Who literally writes about falling.
Yes, she does.
Yes.
Right down to the handrails.
But there's a wonderful line that says, lift your hem. And I thought, okay, lift your hem can go so many ways, metaphorically as well as literally. And Jane Smiley, Pulitzer Prize winner for 1,000 Acres, had just, this Book Circle Critics Award, also sort of about falling, but on the trail, about being outside, and might there be better ways to go or not better ways to go. And then Irene Beckerman taking us through the stages of what counted as first base, second base, third base, and home runs in sexual baseball. And I'm, again, not a sports fan, but I understood what she was talking about. She wrote Love, Loss, and What I Wore.
Yes.
Made into the Broadway play. So she's hilarious. I mean, it's a wonderful, like, what really counted as what stage. So, and then young women facing the idea of what, going to therapy, admitting that you're fallen. Is it saving you from falling? There are tough essays, and there are ones that are like most of them are like turning a light on in a dark room. Women are telling the truth.
I love what you say about in the introduction that these hold up a compact mirror to the world.
That's going back to your question about what flash fiction is. Every story, whether it's an essay, it's an op-ed piece, it's a column, it's a short story, it's flash nonfiction, that it's about having your life be able to be a place where other people can see themselves reflected. But this is a compact mirror. This is the small one. So it's not as if you're not going to get the long backstory. You're not going to find out about the weather. You're not going to find out what it is the moment of illumination or the moment of the irrevocable. When people were asking me what to write about, I'm fascinated by the moment of the irrevocable, when something happens that you cannot go back. And that used to be what I used to tell my students what the moment of irrevocable was. I said, it's when you hit send. But now my students are telling me last year that there's now, like, you can take back your send.
Yes, you can undo it.
Yeah, there's a button labeled repent.
In life, there are things that there is no button that says, you got 30 seconds to take it back. No.
What's interesting to me in going through a lot of these, you said there's no backstory, and there isn't. It's not. None of the stories are very complicated as far as the history of the person telling them. But something that recurred over and over again in these stories is the seed of what led women to feel like they are fallen inevitably starts when they're teenagers or in high school.
Yeah.
They all were talking about, when I was 14, this happened. In high school, this happened. So the seed of being a fallen woman or being somebody who's doing something wrong starts very young for women.
I hadn't thought about it that way, Don, but you're absolutely right. It is when, in a way, the adult self sort of starts to emerge or cracks open the integrity of the child, that the idea of having to accept you know who you are when you're a kid. And it doesn't mean you're happy, but at least you're familiar with who you are. And then when you start to become a woman, it is, I think that guys have their own business about, with becoming a man. And there are I just had one young man in a creative writing class talking about how his parents kept telling him to act more like a boy. And he's saying, I am a boy, and this is how I am. So how can I be more of a boy if this is how a boy acts? But the idea of you're going to be a woman seemed like this huge weight that you had to carry with you. And that, as I say in the introduction, that, if it's a mea culpa, if it is the word culpable is to accept responsibility I mean, it's not only for sin, right? It's culpa, not only accepting the idea of sin, but of responsibility. And so that you need to, as this girl, you were supposed to be responsible. You have to be responsible for saying no. You have to be responsible for keeping everything away from you. You have to be responsible for not tempting anybody. You have to be responsible for everybody else. You have to stop anybody from having lewd thoughts about you. And yet you were supposed to be a knockout. You were supposed to leave boys breathless. You were supposed to leave them, but you were supposed to be untouchable. So how anybody was supposed to be all of that, let alone, it was an impossibility. And the idea of the fallen woman had always been, Eve being the first fallen woman. And she's the first fallen woman because she takes the apple. When people came up to me and they would say, well, as a feminist, don't you believe that God is a woman? And it's like, absolutely not. No female God would say, don't eat this.
Yeah.
No, female God would not, the first rule would not be not to eat something. And an apple, female God would be going, it's good for your teeth. They'll get all that stuff out between your teeth. You could have it with a piece of cheese, which will teach you how to make from the goats and the cows. You could make it into a pie on a cold day. That would be only a male God. The first thing would be like, don't eat that. That's a male God. I have no problem with the idea that is a male God.
I made you, and now I'm going to punish you.
The idea is so Eve wants to eat from the tree of knowledge, right? She wants to pick the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And of course, man falls because of Eve. So we have the fall of man. So all Eves fall because of one broad. And so if there is the idea that if men are fearful of women, especially if women who take action themselves, it's like, well, look what that one woman did. Imagine if you put a whole bunch of them together in one room and you actually taught them to read or gave them the vote, then imagine what would happen. But each woman falls individually. And because we're taught or encouraged to feel such deep shame at everything we've ever done, thought, or said, a lot of the stories don't get told. So this book actually got to number 3 on the Amazon new releases. For an independent press, doesn't happen. I mean, that's it. Really, I'm very proud of it. And again, I would feel almost embarrassed, except I'm not. I'm actually really proud. And the stories that people tell, you see on the back of the book, it says it gives whispered conversations a full voice, because most of the stories that women are telling, what people are reacting to, it's like, I thought I was the only one. There are stories about leaving husbands. There's stories about adultery. There's stories about, first time kissing a girl. There's these different stories that these women are telling, that there's always a sense of nobody's going to understand this. And then they're in there and everybody's going, oh, that? Oh, no. The older women are really like that. I did that in 1962. And the young women that are writing in 2019 are not thinking, because the women didn't say that I did that in 1962. So once those stories are out there, that you realize it's if men have the anxiety of influence, that they're afraid of writing or telling a story because it's been told so many times before, women have the anxiety of invention, of feeling like no one else will have said this before. And so that's why these stories have to get out.
We'll return to our podcast in a moment, but first, here's a soothing musical interlude.
Gina Barreca is a distinguished professor of English literature and feminist theory at the University of Connecticut.
Among her nonfiction and memoir titles are Babes in Boyland, A Personal History of Coeducation in the Ivy League, and Sweet Revenge, The Wicked Delights of Getting Even.
She's also edited the Signet Book of American Humor, the Penguin Book of Women's Humor, and A Sit-Down with the Sopranos, watching Italian-American culture on TV's most talked-about series.
Find out more about the world of Gina Barreca on her Facebook page, facebook.com/Gina Barreca. That's cap G, I-N-A, cap B, A-R-R-E-C-A, or her author page, ginabarreca.com.
And now, we return you to the musical Innertube already in progress.
If you flip through these stories, and I hope everybody will, one thing that flash fiction almost demands is that the first and last sentences be really, really good. And so it's much like a poem. I mean, you really have to start fast, hit the ground running, and really catch us. And I'm going to read a few that I just love. And I think because they are just so wonderful, and it gives a sense of the variety and the different styles. And this first one, is written by Michelle Carter, who advertises herself as an asexual queer woman who has not had anything much in her mouth except for Big Macs and nigiri. And I thought this her flash piece is called Hysterectomy Hysteria. And here's the first sentence. If you had the misfortune of being born with a uterus, and also of being born in America, then you've probably had the displeasure of experiencing the dumpster fire that is the United States healthcare system. Here's another one. This is Madiha Shafkat, Roti Making Dreams. Am I a fallen woman for not knowing how to make a perfect roti? According to my Ammi, yes, I am. And it really, how could you not read after that? You have to find out everything else. This one is beautiful. This is called When Your Friends Say, Oh La La by Emily Toth. The song made us giggle and blush. It's about two teens who go to a movie. It's boring. They fall asleep, and when they wake up, it's 4 a.m. Our goose is cooked, they howl. Our reputation's shot. And what are we going to tell our friends when they say, Ooh La La? That song, Wake Up Little Susie, taught me to fear being a fallen woman.
The Everly Brothers, those nasty men. Well, I think one of the things, too, and John's pointing this out, is that all of the women who are writing about fears and misgivings of coming up short, of not being the perfect person that everybody wants to be. There was a story in there also about a woman who was a working mother, and her mother had worked, and her mother had to take the job. She volunteered at a hospital, and eventually they made her head of a department. And after all those years of being head of a department and being very efficient, then the woman says to her mom, I'm just so proud of what you did. And the mom says, I didn't want to do it. I wanted to stay home with the kids, and I think you should too. And the woman is not, she's taken aback because she thought her mom was her hero, and she was just emulating her mom. And now did I let my mom down because I didn't stay home with the kids? So there's all sorts of levels going on here of interpersonal relationships that wind up not meeting in the middle.
And that you don't know. I mean, it's the idea of the fear of being judged and the way that, and again, always understanding that men have their own issues, right? This is not to say the straitjacket of masculinity is as confining as the straitjacket of femininity. It's just tailored differently. But women don't have, because these stories aren't told out loud. I mean, there's a woman who was talking about having an abortion when she was in her early 20s and being great, Planned Parenthood saved her. But then when she had miscarriages later, she felt like somehow was this punishment for having had this abortion earlier. And it was only after this when she realized that she had a physical anomaly that actually prevented her from being able to, her body physically had nothing to do with the earlier termination, but she had a blood issue that prevented her from being able to take the later babies to term, and that her mother had a termination when it was illegal, when it was in the early 60s, and that she was just saying, like, I wouldn't have felt the way I felt for years if I had known. I wouldn't, but that there's no internalizing of these stories that precede you because their stories have been swept under the rug. And that's what I also say in the introduction and talking about writing, and that, writing it down is the opposite of covering it up. And in that, there is, if not an absolution, there is at least a freedom. There is a freedom in confession, even if there's not somebody to give you absolution at the end of it or to let you reconcile. But you have your own reconciliation, because at least you're accepting the responsibility. And when you tell a story, when you write it down, when you say it out loud, when you read it, when somebody else has access to it, you understand that it is not just something that happened to you, but you can make it something else. The story itself involves redemption. It's like getting your deposit back in life, right? It's like having a pawn ticket. You've been carrying a pawn ticket around of this miserable incident or whatever it is that you had, and then you can take it back and you can get something back, right? After all those years, you discover that it's there, but you get something back from it. And it seems to me that that's an important, that must be part of the urgency the storytelling has in every culture in the world as storytelling. That's got to be part of the motivation for it.
Well, when I look at this collection, 75 people making available to the world personal experiences such as the ones we've been talking about, we have to look at this not just as 75 stories, but 75 acts of courage.
What a nice way of putting it. Yes, it absolutely, it is 75 acts of courage. Unlike, and a couple of the writers have said that themselves, because Bonnie Jean Feldkamp, who is, again, been a columnist for many years. She's with Creators Syndicate. And she wrote initially a very sort of funny piece. And I know she's a good writer. She's been in the other 2 volumes. And I said, Bonnie Jean, I want this to be tougher. I want you to give me something that comes from a different place. I know you got it. I mean, I know her well enough from meetings. And again, we don't spend a lot of time in each other's company, but we talk, we email. She had the story in her journal for years and had only ever read it out loud to her therapist. And then decided, if Gina really wants me to go, wants the real stuff, I'm going to go get the real stuff. And so took that leap, that act of courage, to put it out on the page. But it's having, in a way, to not, I won't say nag, although God knows I can do that, but it was the idea of giving somebody a permission slip. It really was. It was like, please do this. Give her please let Bonnie Jean cross into the territory that's dangerous for her. So her essay is called Depths of the Damned. My father threw me out of the house when I was 18. He could no longer deal with a rebellious teen. Neither of us could recognize my cries for help. And though I tried for some time, I cannot blame my dad for his choices. It was not his fault that I bounced from friend to friend and job to job, nor was it his fault when I ran out of friends and bounced from bed to bed to keep warm. At the time, I didn't think there were any options for me. I appealed to my father several times over the course of a year to let me come back home. He was getting his life together back after his divorce from my stepmother, and I was floundering on the streets. To quote my father, Jean always had to learn the hard way. I mean, that's getting into the tough parts. So it wasn't the funny, easy columnist voiced story. I was like, come on, I know you have the other stuff out there. But it took, just as you said, it took courage, it took bravery, it took permission. And I think it took knowing that she was going to be in the safety of other people talking about similar things, to be able to come out. And not to be, people, readers, who pick it up, again, for Amy Tan, for Bobby Ann Mason. It was so nice to be able to call on people like Honor Moore. It was really, a great philosopher, critical thinker, cultural critic, and to tread on fairly sort of dangerous ground with these people. And then again, to allow younger writers to feel like we could offer them, the elders of the tribe could offer them safety. Like, we won't let them get you. And I got some of the younger writers are like, what's going to happen if my parents read this? Well, I don't think it's going to become like a Netflix series. One thing, you don't have to tell them.
That's true.
I mean, that's also a form of permission. It's like, you don't have to tell them.
I would assume that when you put the word out that we're going to put out this kind of books, that you had writers clamoring to be in there. Did you have writers that you had to turn down?
Yes, there are writers that I had to turn down, but I rarely do open submissions. I don't put a call for submissions out there. I do the 14th century Italian village way of doing things, which is that I call some friends and I go, hey, you know anybody who can, you got a plumber, drywall for the book that's going to come out, God willing, and the waters don't rise next year. It's Fast Famous Women. And so I've already got that sort of lined up for the TOC. And that I did my version of an open call, which was already scary enough, which I put up on Facebook. And I hope that your listeners, that your tribe would consider coming onto my Facebook page, my public Facebook page, where I do post a lot. I like Facebook. I'm active in it and have real conversations. Today I said, I just put up, I said, I hated being a kid.
I saw that.
Really
I saw that. Yeah.
And people write. People tell their stories. You give people a chance to actually tell their story. And it's a really interesting thing. People tend to tell the truth. If you give them a chance just to say, what was it like for you? They want to tell. And anyway, so again, if people would come to, Gina Barreca, that would be great. But so I put up there, I'm looking for women to write short pieces for this. And so that was the first time when I got a number of people that I didn't actively solicit or asked friends through friends. And so even that small sort of shout into the wilderness brought a number of writers, many of whom are turned in great pieces. I asked for, just as sort of John was saying, I asked for like the first line and the last line. I said, I want a 2-sentence pitch. Don't give me anything else. If you just have me more than 2 lines, I'm not reading it. So, and then I understand that you don't know how to work, within guidelines. So that's not, not a good start. And there were women from India who were writing about Indian politicians. There were women from various places and people I don't know who sent me their work. And then I followed up. And so it is a diverse crowd. And I got a great TOC with other sort of remarkable and steady writers. And so again, sort of one of the nice things is that once the usual suspects are in it, so Caroline Levitt is this New York Times bestseller. It's like, okay, so I'm going to do, what am I doing for Famous? It's like they want to be. So they signed up like, I didn't even have to ask. That's such an amazing thing. So I'm hoping to continue to do these because for me, it's like throwing a party. And it's like a big dinner party. And, they're just like any big dinner party, there's going to be 6 women who are going to stay over by the appetizers and the champagne. And they're going to be laughing their tails off. And everybody's going to be interrupting everybody. And then there are like 12 women who are sitting with the, carving the meat off the bone. And they're like, serious discussion, and they're with the Shiraz and the Cabernet Sauvignon, and they're doing their, and 3 of them are just drinking seltzer because they're drinking. Yeah, there are 6 women crying on the veranda. There are 6 women on the patio who are comforting each other and sharing Kleenex and saying it'll be fine, but they're throwing their arms over each other, and going, "Oh God, I understand what you mean." So, and people change places in the course of the dinner party.
Depending on the topic, depending on a lot of different things. You make me ask my partner, Don, hey, Don, do you think there could ever be a collection like this for guys?
Yeah, I think there is. I think I saw a collection once that had Jack London and Ernest Hemingway. Yeah, and you're right. If there's there are hundreds of collections of male writers, obviously, but I don't think that there are that many collections of male writers where they bare their soul in any kind of an intimate way. They may do it, but they may get around it by being, quiet at one moment in the middle of a fight or something like that. I don't know, but I see your point, John, that it's really difficult to get guys to open up this way, and I think that's one of the problems that some of the women in some of these essays have talked about, is that trying to crack the nut of the man is a little tough, and trying to, as I said before, live up to whatever facade that man has put up to say, hey, this is what women should be like. Trying to live up to that is also kind of unsettling for women.
I think that, unfortunately, crack the nut is an infelicitous metaphor. I mean, that is what, traded off to the other context. And that's what men see women who are saying, but let's talk about this. It's like, you're cracking my nut. This isn't.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that I found out about my wife. And John, you could join in if you want. But my wife would come home from work and complain about somebody at work who was making her life miserable. And I knew some of the people that she worked with. So my thing was, well, do you want me to talk to them? I leap up and I say, let me solve this problem. And my wife, after about 2 or 3 of these conversations, finally looked at me and said, I don't want you to solve the problem. I just want you to listen. And I finally got that when she's unloading, she just wants to unload to somebody who will listen to it and then say, yeah, you're right. And then it's out there, it's out of her. And so therefore it's not solved, but she's sort of, she's over the hump and she can work on it. But she didn't need this knight in shining armor to go rescue her
or fix anything.
And that was a very important lesson I learned
That took you only 2 or 3 conversations. It took us 28 years.
Well, the conversations were over a number of years. I think it was 5 or 10 years before we finally figured that out. Because again,
that's what you were brought up to be. That's what you're supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
And it's a different routine. And this is, again, a true story. And my husband has heard me tell it many times, but it's, at one point I had come back and I was switching agents. Agents are one of the things I had not been able to grow from stem cells. So yes. Agents, they're like unicorns, you never see them in the wild. And, so I came home and it was a long day. I'm about a 2.5 hour, train ride from New York. I have to drive from the station in Connecticut. And I came back and I needed to process a lot. I met with 3 different people and they all had drawbacks, but real, seductive points. And so Michael, who was also retired from being an English professor and very successful in publishing, had one of the largest selling introductions to literature in the country. So he knew in a way what I was talking about, but I sell books one at a time and even sell them like to the University of Texas. So it'd be like 30,000 at a shot, where I'm going like, I have some in my car. If you have, if you have $18, I have one in my car. I have book plates made. So it was a different landscape. And I realized I was really talking at him. I was unloading, just as Don was saying. And so I was like, okay. So this one, Nancy was really good because I understand that she has, the connections with Zen, the Big 10 publishers, and then she's done this. But Deborah really understood my work and she was going, and I know, and yet, Felicia said that, she was like quoting my work back to me. And I know if I do that she will be, and Michael, if you're listening, said, you said do. And again, at least the reason we're still married for all these years is because at least he could laugh and acknowledge that, yeah. And he said, I don't think you really needed me to follow your train of thought. You just needed to say it. You really weren't looking for me. And he said, and that was sort of funny. I was like, okay, I am with like the Three Stooges. I'm explaining, New York publishing, at the end of its natural life to the Three Stooges. And Larry is responding to the subtlety of the choices I have to make. And so, yes, we listen in different ways. And I think that the question, when you said, well, could there ever be a collection like this event? I think that would be called the Canon of British and American Literature. So, that would be it. It's like when guys come up, and there's always one guy at the back, if I'm giving a talk at a bookstore or a lecture at a library, there's always one guy in the back going, how come there's Women's History Month? There's no Men's History Month. And it's like the rest of the year, you have all of the rest of flying. And Black History Month is the shortest month. It's like, what do you want? We get March, and, people of color get February. And this seems somehow unfair to you. But there's always guys in a hunting cap with flaps. He thinks he's Holden Caulfield. And so I think all of those stories about men's perspectives in life is what the rest of the library gives us. That's all, through all of time, and has been required reading for many years.
Well, we've been talking about Fast Fallen Women, 75 Essays of Flash Nonfiction, edited by our guest, Gina Barreca. Follow her on Facebook, read her other stuff, and we're going to have you back, Gina, because, it's just like we just got started. We just finished the aperitif, and now, it's time for the main course. So we'll do that. And thank you for being on the Musical Innertube.
I had such a good time. Thank you both. And I'll be back. I'm a cheap date. Just let me know.
Thank you.
Bye.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Our lovely little podcast is available everywhere good podcasts are found. Listen on your favorite platform, and if you like what you hear, please give us a good rating.
And spread the word. Tell your friends about the Innertube, and let them know they can subscribe to the podcast on our website, musicalinnertube.com.
There you can listen to all of our podcasts, see pictures and biographies of our guests, and contact us. You can even click on the microphone button in the lower right corner to leave us a voicemail.
And don't forget to leave your email address on our Talk to the Tube page so we can stay in touch.
And you can email us directly at musicalinnertube@gmail.com.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.